Pay attention to the woman entering the dealership restroom in this security footage. That's Lindsay, a 40-year-old woman dropping off her car for service, unaware that 27-year-old Christopher Teal, a large man loitering inside, is about to follow her. What she doesn't know is that Teal is watching, waiting, and moments later forces the stall door open. He grabs her, restrains her, and commits the assault. The footage captures only the beginning of the horror, but the repercussions will echo far beyond these walls. Now, a courtroom will decide Teal's fate, and the world will wait to see the consequences for his actions. May 2018, Carter Volkswagen in Seattle's Ballard neighborhood was having an ordinary Tuesday morning. Customers filtered in and out of the service department. A 40-year-old woman dropped her vehicle off for routine service. Nothing unusual, nothing that should have put her in danger. But Christopher Teal was there too. And even though no one knew it at the time, the homeless man spelt danger, and he had been lurking around for just this moment. Unfortunately for Lindsay, she didn't know that Christopher Teal was inside the building. Teal had been released from prison just 4 days earlier. In those 4 days, he had no supervision, no monitoring, no restriction preventing him from wandering freely through the city, free to do as he pleased. He was homeless and staying near Ballard, a neighborhood that by that point had become a focal point of Seattle's homelessness crisis.
This is State of Washington versus Christopher Teal, cause number 181008391, Seattle designation.
Teal, a 6'3", 250-pound man, had been watching. When the woman headed to the bathroom, he followed. He forced open the stall door, grabbed her by the throat and shoulder. The woman would later describe what happened next in haunting detail.
He was able to gain access to the stall. That's when he was able to grab me by my throat and my shoulder, and he threw me down on the ground in front of the handicap stall, and we fought for several minutes. She screamed.
He choked her, and then came words that would stick with her forever.
"You want this.
God wants this." The attack was brutal, calculated, but something else was happening outside that bathroom door. Dealership employees heard the commotion. They didn't hesitate. They broke into the bathroom, pulled Teal off the woman, wrestled him to the ground. Their intervention likely saved her life. By the time police arrived, Teal was pinned to the floor by multiple employees. The woman was alive, traumatized, but alive. Officers took him into custody. During questioning, Teal didn't deny what he'd done. He admitted he'd followed her into that bathroom specifically to assault her. Then, in a disturbing display of continued aggression, he tried to headbutt the detective interviewing him. Again, here's the detail that made this case even more chilling. Christopher Teal had been released from prison just 4 days earlier. 4 days. And he had already gone back to his lawless ways. This was not a momentary lapse. This was not confusion. This was intent. And it raised an immediate question that many people in Ballard had already been asking. How did someone like this end up here? As if that was not enough, Christopher Teal would soon come up with a reaction in court that no one could have predicted. To understand what happened inside that bathroom, you have to step back and look at what was happening outside of it. Ballard is a neighborhood that changed rapidly in the years leading up to 2018. Once known for its Scandinavian roots and quiet residential streets, it became a dense mix of apartments, businesses, nightlife, and tourism. At the same time, Seattle's homelessness crisis was accelerating. In 2015, the city declared a civil emergency on homelessness. The number of people living unsheltered had grown dramatically. Tents appeared under bridges, along sidewalks, in parks, and near businesses. In response, city leadership embraced a strategy centered on low-barrier sheltering. Low-barrier shelters were designed to remove obstacles to entry. No sobriety requirements, no background checks, minimal rules. The idea was to get people indoors first and address other issues later. Sanctioned encampments and safe lots for RVs and vehicles followed. These sites were meant to provide structure and services without criminalizing homelessness. But the policy had consequences, especially in neighborhoods like Ballard. Ballard Commons Park became a hub for large encampments. Residents reported open drug use, discarded needles, theft, and assaults. Business owners complained of customers feeling unsafe. Police response was often limited by staffing shortages and shifting enforcement priorities. Encampments would be cleared and then reappear blocks away. Nicholsville, one of the sanctioned encampments near Ballard, operated with minimal screening. Residents came and went freely. Oversight was limited, and while many people there were simply trying to survive, the environment also allowed individuals with violent histories to blend in unnoticed. Christopher Teal was one of them. Just days after his release from prison, he was living unsheltered in the area. There was no alert system, no warning to nearby businesses, no mechanism to track whether someone with a violent past was receiving mental health treatment or supervision. For critics of the city's approach, the attack at Carter Volkswagen was not a shock. They had been warning that public safety was being sacrificed in the name of ideology. The Ballard encampments paint a stark picture of life on the edge. People living in RVs along Leary Way face tough realities every day, struggling to keep their spaces clean without the city's promised services. Septic trucks were supposed to visit regularly, but those visits stopped months ago, leaving residents to manage without support. The result? Unavoidable sanitation problems and a constant fight to maintain dignity amid harsh conditions. One resident describes the frustration plainly. City crews come by not to help, but to push them along. It's a cycle of disruption without solutions, and the RV dwellers feel abandoned. They are caught between managing their own survival and the rising fear and discomfort voiced by local businesses and neighbors who witness open drug use and unsafe behaviors just a short distance away. The local community isn't blind to these problems. Parents watching over their children in nearby parks worry about trash and needles, while business owners fence off property after repeated open-air drug dealing incidents. Yet, homeless residents acknowledge the damage their camps can cause. They understand why neighbors want change, but feel stuck without real alternatives.
Others who live or work in the area say the people living in the dozen or so RVs and cars along Leary Way are a regular source of trouble.
Advocates on the ground watch this same painful cycle play out. Sweeps don't solve the core issues, only move encampments from one spot to another. This constant displacement worsens public health risks and social tensions, leaving both the housed and homeless trapped in a revolving door of frustration. Residents and workers describe a neighborhood under strain. The presence of RVs and tents brings undeniable challenges: public drug use, discarded needles, and a pervasive sense of unsafety during the day and night. Some workers say the crisis hurts everyone, staining local businesses and community life.
You literally see people shooting up and completely out of it and bent down.
Children play nearby, a stark contrast to the struggles unfolding just steps away. Parents voice frustration at the city's failure to provide lasting solutions, watching the homeless camps get pushed around like pieces on a chessboard with no meaningful progress. For those living in the encampments, the call is clear: help with addiction, mental health services, and real pathways forward, not just displacement. The desire for a dignified life clashes with a system that cycles through temporary fixes, often ignoring the human stories beneath the tents and RV roofs. A homeless advocate has this to say.
Just had syringes out, basically on display for sale as far as I could tell.
Despite this cry for help, the dangers that this system pose will soon be seen when Lindsay breaks her silence. After the attack, silence. In the immediate aftermath, the story made headlines. A woman in dealership bathroom. A homeless man arrested. There were statements from police, from the dealership, from city leaders. And then, gradually, the coverage faded. The woman remained anonymous. She didn't give interviews. She didn't appear on camera. She tried to return to her life, but trauma doesn't fade on a news cycle. Nearly a year passed, and during that time, she tried to do what many victims are told to do: work within the system. In 2017, the aftermath of the shocking crime that made Lindsay a victim revealed a city divided. On one side, residents and businesses voiced fears and demanded stronger security measures in city-sanctioned encampments. On the other, activist groups pushed back forcefully, warning that focusing on crime would further stigmatize homeless individuals and deepen polarization. This tension surfaced clearly in Ballard, where local residents described daily encounters with open drug use, visible syringes, and a sense that safety is slipping away. Many feel trapped between compassion for the homeless and legitimate concerns about their own neighborhoods.
They say they're going to have these stuff come by, the trucks come by for the septic and stuff, so it doesn't, become nasty or stink or anything, and I haven't seen them since the beginning of summer.
On social media and in political circles, fierce debates erupted. Some dismissed her as a convenient symbol used to stoke fear, while others saw how her experience illuminated the dangerous gaps in current policies. One city advocate criticized the official response as more concerned with maintaining a narrative than with protecting vulnerable citizens, arguing that the prevalence of crime in and around encampments complicates public perception and policymaking. Neighboring voices capture the complexity.
They do just keep getting swept, and then they move, and then they come back, and then they just get moved around with no real resolution to the issue.
Property owners called for addressing root causes rather than just symptoms.
Just somehow just get them help. I mean, whether it's drug issues or mental health issues, we got to help the people and get them off the streets.
And during this time, Lindsay had to find a way to live with herself and the experience he put her through. Nearly a year passed. The media storm around the Carter Subaru attack had erupted and faded. But through all of it, the woman at the center of this story remained anonymous, silent, until she wasn't. Lindsay that's the name she'd later go public with, made a decision. She reached out to documentary filmmaker Christopher Rufo. She wanted her story told, but this time in her own words. And her first words were,
I was losing. I was losing this battle, and it was terrifying.
Before that, though, she'd tried the proper channels. She met with her sitting city councilman for nearly an hour, sat down, face to face, explained what happened to her and what needed to change. She was met with what she describes as dismissiveness. Her story, her trauma, her near-death experience in that bathroom, it didn't fit the preferred narrative. The narrative of compassion for the homeless, the narrative that city leaders had built their political careers on. So she went around them. April 22nd, 2019, Rufo posted a 3-minute video to Facebook. Lindsay sat down on camera and described what Christopher Teal did to her.
During the sexual assault, he said, you want this. And he said, God wants this.
The physical attack, the terror, the 15 or 20 seconds between walking into that bathroom and hearing the door open behind her.
And I thought to myself that I didn't want to die. And I didn't want to die on a linoleum trailer bathroom floor. And I didn't want my story to end there.
She described fighting for her life, losing, being overpowered by a man a foot taller and 120 pounds heavier. And she talked about what came after, what still comes after, every single day. The nightmares, the anxiety, the feeling that the city she lived in had failed her. More than that, she said the attack could have been prevented. She believed leadership decisions, policies that prioritized ideology over safety, created an environment where this was inevitable. Her video spread rapidly, millions of views, thousands of comments. Some praised her courage, others accused her of politicizing her trauma. The debate was no longer just about what happened in that bathroom. It was about homelessness, about public safety, about whose suffering mattered, and whose stories were allowed to be told. But even as the debate raged, new voices were going to join in. Lindsay wasn't alone. The owner of Carter Volkswagen expressed deep frustration with the city's handling of the situation. The dealership had raised concerns before. They had dealt with trespassing, loitering, and safety issues.
Yeah, of course this makes us all angry.
A neighboring business owner spoke publicly as well, describing a pattern of escalating problems around the area.
Enough is enough, and we need to start dealing with the criminal aspect of what we're doing.
These weren't abstract complaints. They were first-hand accounts from people whose employees and customers felt unsafe. According to local news reports, calls for service in the area had increased. Police response times were stretched thin, and yet, enforcement remained inconsistent. For many in Ballard, Lindsay's story summarized what they had been experiencing quietly for years, and even years after. Day after day, local residents, workers, and business owners live side by side with the encampments in Ballard, and they're worn down. The camps aren't just a distant problem, they're right at their doorstep, turning familiar streets into areas where drug use happens openly. Needles lie around and trash piles up. Fear and frustration have become part of daily life. Business owners see customers walk away, uneasy about safety. Property owners have resorted to fencing off their lots because open-air drug dealing and discarded syringes have become constant hazards. They feel unprotected, caught between wanting compassion for those experiencing homelessness and demanding a safe environment to run their businesses.
Yeah, I saw open-air drug dealing in our parking lot. Just had syringes out, basically on display for sale as far as I could tell.
Parents worry as well. Just steps away, their children play in parks, innocent and unaware of the struggles nearby. But the visual of tents walling up sidewalks, limping along the edge of commercial areas, and the trash stains cast a shadow over the neighborhood's sense of security. These parents watch as encampments are pushed around from one spot to another, with no lasting change in sight.
They do just keep getting swept, and then they move, and then they come back, and then they just get moved around with no real resolution to the issue.
Among the housed, there's a strong sense of being underserved by city policies. They report seeing people openly using drugs during day and night, and many no longer feel safe, even walking around in daylight. The community's reality is one of visible suffering, mixed with their own growing unease, uncertainty, and anger.
But it just doesn't feel safe, even just to come here in the daylight anymore.
At the same time, homeless residents acknowledge their camp's impact, recognizing why some neighbors want change. Yet they feel trapped, pushed around without any clear alternatives for getting help with addiction or mental health. The cycle of sweeps only displaces problems rather than solves them, leaving a community divided and exhausted. The city's approach contributes to this tension. Sweeps happen repeatedly, clearing encampments only for them to reappear nearby. This pattern frustrates residents who see no lasting safety improvements, while homeless advocates warn that this shuffling worsens public health risks without addressing root causes.
You can't just keep sweeping around from one spot to the next, because then you're just going to move the drug use.
Local workers emphasize the wider drain this crisis causes. Business declines, neighborhoods feel less welcoming, and the broad community suffers from the rise in crime associated with these encampments. Frustration mounts on all sides because the problem feels permanent and growing.
Oh, it's hurting everybody. It's hurting everybody. Businesses, residents.
One striking detail: the line between commercial and residential zones and the homeless camps is razor thin. This proximity sharpens conflicts as families, customers, and employees encounter sanitation hazards and risky situations daily. The neighborhood is pitched between two realities that coexist, one struggling to survive, the other trying desperately to feel secure. Calls grow louder for solutions that go beyond shuffling people from one encampment to another. Both housed and unhoused voices urge for serious efforts focusing on addiction treatment, mental health support, and meaningful housing options. The community demands answers that balance empathy for vulnerable individuals with respect for safety and property.
I mean, whether it's drug issues or mental health issues, we got to help the people and get them off the streets.
Without real change, the daily strain continues, and one of the prominent victims, Lindsay, thinks her ordeal could have been avoided if the leadership was different.
We need stronger leaders. And strong leaders, in my opinion, are out there.
She also thinks
what we're doing right now is actually harming the city.
When it applies to homeless people, according to this news report, their concerns and outrage are justified.
Teal had a Texas warrant for his arrest, but the city of Seattle doesn't require warrant checks of people staying at its shelters, or Nicholsville in this case. If so, some say the attack on Lindsay.
Furthermore, what Teal would do in court would further justify Lindsay and homeowners concerned about safety. 4 days after the attack, Christopher Teal sat in a King County jail cell, but the legal system had questions about whether he was even mentally fit to stand trial. February 2020, the King County courtroom in Seattle prepared for what should have been a routine competency hearing.
This is State of Washington versus Christopher Teal, cause number 181008391, Seattle designation.
Teal stood in red jail scrubs beside his court-appointed attorney, Weed Berklin. King County officers positioned themselves nearby, standard protocol for an in-custody defendant facing charges.
The defendant's in court for a competency hearing to determine whether he's fit to stand trial. Standing next to him is Weed Berklin, his court-appointed attorney.
Prosecutor Emily Peterson addressed the court, confirming everyone's presence. The judge prepared to discuss Teal's mental fitness. Just another hearing in a busy courtroom.
I'm Emily Peterson on behalf of the state. Mr. Teal's present. He's in custody. He's represented by counsel, Mr. Berklin.
He raises his arm toward Berklin, but extra security's at the ready.
My understanding from his counsel, who I'll defer to in a moment.
Without provocation.
And then everything exploded.
Teal punches his own attorney.
Without warning, Teal turned and violently punched Weed Berklin in the head. The courtroom erupted into chaos. Officers swarmed immediately, but subduing a 6'3", 250-pound violent offender isn't easy, even with 4 trained guards.
The guards immediately pounce on the 6'3" defendant and take him to the ground. Teal's attorney looks to be unhurt.
The struggle spilled across the courtroom floor. Commands echoed through the space. Face down. Put your arm behind your back. 4 officers fought to control him while the judge watched from the bench, unable to proceed. This wasn't just resistance. This was explosive violence from a man already facing life-altering charges. They fitted him with a spit hood, a protective measure reserved for the most dangerous defendants. Then they dragged him from the courtroom, the hearing abandoned. Weed Berklin stood afterward, visibly shaken but uninjured. He made a decision that day. He would withdraw from the case. But notably, he chose not to press assault charges against his former client.
Berklin chooses not to press charges, but he does remove himself from the case.
Think about that for a moment. An attorney, doing his job, gets punched in the head by the man he's supposed to defend. The attack raised serious questions. If Teal couldn't control himself in a courtroom, surrounded by armed officers facing a judge, what would happen during a trial? How would the court ensure the safety of everyone involved? 2 weeks later, those questions would be answered. 2 weeks passed. The courtroom prepared for Christopher Teal's return, but this time everything was different.
This time strapped to a rolling chair.
New counsel needs time.
His biggest concern is how his hair looked in his mugshot.
Gone was the man who'd stood freely beside his attorney. In his place sat a defendant strapped into a specialized restraint chair, the kind normally reserved for maximum security transport. His arms secured, his movement restricted, every precaution taken. The courtroom felt it too. The tension, the uncertainty. Security had been doubled. New counsel stood at a careful distance. Everyone remembered what happened 2 weeks ago. Everyone wondered what would happen today. The judge prepared to address the competency hearing, the same issue that had sparked violence before. Would Teal explode again? Would there be another attack? But if the court thought they would keep Teal's misdemeanor under control, then they really didn't know Christopher Teal. The court proceeding went on without any hassle until it was time for Teal to speak. When Christopher Teal finally spoke, what came out of his mouth wasn't what anyone expected.
I got one question, one thing to say. I'd like to know where the they got that photo of me with my short hair. Because that was on Facebook, and I don't have a Facebook.
The room went silent. Here was a man facing first-degree charges, a man who'd violently attacked his own attorney just days earlier, a man strapped into a restraint chair because he was too dangerous to sit freely in court, and his concern, his mugshot photo, not the victim whose life he'd shattered, not the charges that could send him to prison for life, not the assault on his attorney that had just added more time to his potential sentence, his hair, in a photo, on the news. The psychiatric evaluation from 2019 had already suggested Teal might be feigning symptoms of psychosis, that he understood the charges against him, that his behavior might be strategic rather than symptomatic. Another hearing, another evaluation, more questions about whether Christopher Teal was fit to stand trial, and his judgment still hung in the balance. The courtroom chaos didn't stop the legal process. Despite the outbursts, the restraint chairs, and the bizarre mugshot complaints, the case against Christopher Teal was moving forward, and it was airtight. The evidence had been mounting since that May morning at Carter Volkswagen. Physical evidence, witness testimony, and perhaps most damning, Teal's own words. During police questioning, Teal admitted he'd followed the woman into that bathroom specifically to sexually assault her. No confusion, no misunderstanding. He told detectives exactly what he'd planned to do. Then, true to form, he tried to headbutt the detective interviewing him. The dealership employees testified about what they'd seen and heard. The victim's medical examination documented her injuries. The timeline was clear. The facts were indisputable. By late 2021, Christopher Teal had been convicted on all charges, first-degree and unlawful imprisonment.
New tonight, a man convicted of raping a woman in a car dealership bathroom has been sentenced.
Then came sentencing.
And captured Teal. Today, the judge handed down a sentence of 8.5 years to life in prison for first-degree rape and unlawful imprisonment.
But this sentencing still left some questions unanswered. Seattle spends over $1 billion a year on homelessness, yet the tents keep multiplying and the crisis deepens. Christopher Rufo, a keen observer and researcher, digs beneath the surface of this failure. He identifies 4 powerful forces driving the city's response and blocking real progress. First are the socialists. They blame capitalism, tech giants, and skyrocketing rents as the root of homelessness. Their message stirs resentment against the wealthy, but Rufo points out that data shows only a small portion of the homeless became homeless due to rent increases. Most face struggles like addiction, mental illness, or family breakdown. Promising to tear down the system won't suddenly house thousands living on the streets. Then there are the compassion brigades, activists driven by a faith in unlimited empathy. They view homelessness as a pure moral crisis demanding endless tolerance. They've pushed to legalize camping nearly anywhere, resisting enforcement and cleanups, even as the city succumbs to rising crime, open drug use, and unsanitary conditions. Compassion here often means few limits and lots of enablement. At the same time, the homeless industrial complex has grown into a costly, sprawling network of nonprofits and agencies. While many workers earn honest wages, Rufo reveals that institutional priorities often focus on contracts and budgets rather than results. This industry thrives by chasing government funding, even when homelessness grows or stays steady. Innovative policy becomes less about solving problems and more about sustaining organizations. Finally, he highlights the addiction evangelists, a vocal and politically influential group advocating to normalize drug use rather than treat it. Their efforts to establish safe injection sites and mobile drug consumption vans symbolize a city willing to accept or even subsidize suffering. This approach attracts more addicts and fuels public disorder and migration from other places. Rufo stresses the stark contradiction. The city pours nearly $1 billion annually into these systems, yet homelessness marches on, crime rises, and neighborhoods suffer. He calls for a hard conversation, one that balances compassion with accountability, and that addresses addiction, mental illness, and unchecked migration head-on. According to Rufo, without confronting these ideological and institutional barriers, the city will remain trapped in costly cycles of displacement and enablement. That means not more empty promises, but realistic containment. That means reforming institutions that perpetuate the crisis, not just funding them forever. And that means policies that protect public order while offering genuine pathways to recovery and stability. For Lindsay, the verdict brought a measure of justice, but not closure. She continues to live with the psychological aftermath of that day, the fear, the memories, the knowledge that her life was permanently altered in a place she should have been safe. She became an advocate, speaking out not just for herself, but for others who felt ignored. The city of Seattle continues to wrestle with the same questions that surrounded her case. How do you balance compassion with safety? How do you protect vulnerable populations without ignoring the risks posed by individuals with violent histories? And how many warnings does a community need before tragedy forces change? This story isn't just about a single crime. It's about policy, about accountability, about the real-world consequences of decisions made far from the places where they're felt. It's about a woman who walked into a dealership restroom and came out changed forever. And it's about a city still struggling to confront uncomfortable truths.